Far from the battlefield, deep inside the forest, the small mushroom finally slowed down. Beside him, the little pig companion stayed close, both of them listening carefully to the distant sounds of battle. The forest looked calm, but the air still carried tension. Then something strange happened. Without warning, the mushroom's body jerked upward as if pulled by an invisible force. For a brief second, he lost control completely. His movement wasn't his own. Even he didn't understand what had just happened. The sensation vanished as quickly as it came, leaving him frozen in confusion. It felt like something had connected to him, then released him. The pig noticed immediately. So did the mushroom. For the first time, fear replaced curiosity, because whatever had happened came from far beyond the forest. Then the distant explosions reached them. Boom after boom echoed from the giant mushroom plains ahead. The sound rolled through the trees like thunder. Both of them turned toward it at once. Something major was happening there, and whether he wanted it or not, the strange pull inside his body seemed connected to that battlefield.
Curiosity overcame caution. The small mushroom climbed forward with Piggy and looked beyond the ridge. What he saw immediately changed the mood. Below them, the battlefield was overflowing with mushrooms. They were pouring out in endless numbers from the giant mushroom trunk, dropping into the open field one after another like a living flood. The sound never stopped. More arrivals, more movement, no pause. Even from a distance, the chaos was obvious. Human fighters were already struggling to keep formation. Some shouted for healing. Others searched desperately for support or heavy units that still hadn't arrived. The line was weakening under pressure. To the little mushroom, the scene looked strange rather than frightening. From his point of view, the humans were the ones attacking first. The mushroom army looked like frightened relatives rushing into danger. And the more he watched, the more confused he became. Why were there so many humans here? Why were they attacking his kind? Piggy stayed silent beside him, but both understood one thing. This was far bigger than a random fight. The entire field had become a war zone, and somehow they had arrived right at its edge.
The little mushroom stayed low beside Piggy, trying not to be seen. But below, the battle had already become brutal. Mushrooms and humans collided at close range, each side striking without pause. The field was filled with panic, shouting, and bodies falling faster than anyone could count. One human cried for help as mushrooms closed in. A second later, he was overwhelmed. Another fighter was struck down before he could even recover his footing. For the little mushroom watching above, the violence was sudden and confusing. No one looked heroic anymore, only desperate. At the center of that chaos, Chase stood frozen. The proud swordsman who had spoken of becoming Sword Saint was no longer thinking about victory. Fear had stripped everything away. His sword slipped from his hand, his breathing broke. For the first time, he admitted the truth inside himself. He didn't want fame. He didn't want glory. He only wanted to survive. That confession hit harder than any wound, because once ambition disappeared, what remained was a young fighter realizing how close death truly was. And in the middle of a battlefield collapsing around him, survival became his only thought. The battlefield had already fallen into chaos, and from the ground, the little mushroom could only watch as shadows appeared above. One after another, figures descended from the sky with terrifying speed. Heavy boots struck the earth. Magic pressure followed immediately after. The air changed the moment they landed. These were not ordinary fighters. Every movement carried discipline. Every presence carried authority. At the center stood Uncle Seth, still holding the front line despite everything he had endured. Around him, the strongest forces quickly gathered.
The red-haired girl ready to move, the blue-haired mage floating with power already forming around her, and the others taking position without needing commands. For anyone watching, it was obvious. This was no longer a scattered defense. This had become a full response from the highest level. Even the wounded nearby lifted their heads in disbelief, because the people arriving now were the kind usually called only when a battlefield had already crossed into danger beyond control. And in that exact moment, hope returned. The experts had finally arrived. Just as the battlefield reached its breaking point, reinforcements finally arrived. Golden light appeared first, calm, controlled, powerful. A blonde warrior stepped forward with complete confidence, speaking like someone who had already judged the entire battle. Beside him, another elite fighter moved without hesitation, touching the front line as if checking who still remained standing. No panic, no urgency, only certainty. Then, a masked swordsman spoke quietly, telling the exhausted guild members to step back. They had done enough. From this point forward, the strongest would take control. The atmosphere changed immediately. Even before anyone attacked, the field itself seemed to recognize their presence. Then, she appeared. A silver-haired mage floated upward, staff raised toward the sky. Blue energy gathered above her like a widening star. The air vibrated. Light expanded across the battlefield in every direction. Mass teleportation, a high-level spell far beyond ordinary guild magic. This was not just support, it was battlefield control on a massive scale. For the exhausted survivors below, one thing became clear. The true elite had finally entered the fight, and the battle was about to shift completely. The spell activated instantly. Before Chase could even understand what was happening, a blue sphere wrapped around his body and lifted him from the ground. His fallen sword remained below as he drifted upward in stunned silence. Then, more spheres appeared, one after another. Wounded fighters, unconscious guild members, and even those trapped in the middle of combat were enclosed in floating barriers. Every bubble rose smoothly into the sky. No one resisted. No one could. The battlefield below grew smaller as dozens of survivors were lifted away from danger at once. The silver-haired mage had not attacked the enemy. She had removed every vulnerable human from the battlefield in a single move. A perfect extraction. Even the mushrooms stopped for a moment, staring upward as their enemies floated beyond reach. To them, it looked unnatural, like prey suddenly stolen by the sky itself. The strongest mushrooms could only watch as the battlefield emptied of easy targets. And for the humans inside those spheres, one truth became clear. The weak had been pulled out. What remained below would now be a fight only for those strong enough to stay. The spell did not stop after the rescue. High above the battlefield, the silver-haired mage remained suspended beneath a giant magic circle glowing across the sky. Its patterns spread wider and wider, covering the entire combat zone like a second sky made of pure mana. Every floating sphere answered her control perfectly. The wounded, the unconscious, even those barely breathing, each one remained suspended safely inside the spell. But the strain was enormous. This was no ordinary teleportation. It required absolute control over every target at once. The mage inhaled sharply, gathering more power through her body. His blue light intensified around her. Then she pushed the spell further. The air itself bent under the force of her mana. Winds spiraled upward, carrying every sphere higher, farther from danger. In one movement, the extraction phase ended. The battlefield below was finally cleared of those who could no longer fight. Only the elite remained. And now, with civilians and weaker guild members removed, the sky itself seemed to announce what came next.
The real battle was only beginning. The magic circle above finally sealed shut. Its light collapsed into a single point, signaling the end of the rescue. Below, the battlefield grew unnaturally quiet for a moment. The mushrooms looked around in confusion. Their weaker targets were gone. Only a handful of humans remained, calm, standing together, completely different from the exhausted fighters who had just been evacuated. Even the mechanical mushroom units hesitated. The atmosphere had changed. Then the blonde warrior stepped forward. No long speech, no wasted motion. He looked across the enemy field and gave a simple command: finish the rest. That confidence alone carried more pressure than shouting ever could. And then he moved. His blade cut forward in one clean arc, faster than most eyes could follow. The strike crossed the field instantly. The nearest mushroom didn't even have time to react. One precise slash became the opening signal for the elite counterattack. After all the confusion, all the panic, and all the survival struggle, the battlefield had entered a new phase. Now the strongest humans were no longer defending, they were hunting. The blonde warrior planted his foot into the ground and gripped his weapon with both hands. The earth cracked beneath him before the attack even began. This was no test strike. He drew power through his entire body, muscles tightening as golden energy surged along the blade. Then he roared, a full-force downward strike, Hero Blade. The attack came like a falling pillar of light. Its speed tore the air apart as he descended, bringing the blade down with overwhelming force directly into the mushroom ranks. The impact exploded outward instantly. A bright slash carved through the battlefield, cutting a wide path across the field in a single sweep. Mushrooms near the center were thrown aside before they even understood what hit them. Stone shelters split. Mechanical units were forced backward. Even the stronger mushroom line broke under that first elite strike. This was completely different from the earlier struggle. Where ordinary guild members fought to survive, this attack erased an entire section of the battlefield in one motion. And for the mushroom army, the message was immediate. A far stronger enemy had entered the war. The golden slash from Hero Blade had barely finished tearing across the battlefield when another movement cut through the air. A dark figure launched forward at impossible speed. Unlike the direct power of the blonde warrior, this attack came with silence, precision, control. The assassin-class fighter moved like a shadow gliding over the battlefield. Then his hand formed a sign: Shadow Clone. Instantly, one figure became many. Copies burst outward in every direction, each one carrying the same killing intent. Dozens of shadows rushed together like a black wave. To the mushroom army below, it looked as if darkness itself had begun attacking. Every clone charged with synchronized speed, surrounding targets before impact. No hesitation, no wasted movement. This was battlefield elimination at expert level. Where the sword strike destroyed by force, these shadows hunted through speed and numbers. The mushrooms had just survived one devastating attack, but now they faced an entire storm of assassins descending from above. And the real battle had only just begun. While the shadow clones flooded the battlefield, the assassin prepared the next attack. A single shuriken appeared in her hand, dark metal, razor-sharp, spinning with hidden force. Not an ordinary weapon, a class skill, whirlwind shuriken attack, rain of iron. She released it downward. The moment it left her fingers, the spinning blades split. One became many, two became dozens. Then the sky filled with steel. Hundreds of spinning shuriken multiplied in midair, scattering like a deadly storm over the battlefield below. Each blade rotated fast enough to cut through armor, flesh, and stone alike. From below, it looked like iron rain descending from the sky. The mushrooms had no time to react. The attack covered too wide an area, too many angles, too much speed. This was not aimed at one target. It was designed to crush entire groups at once. The battlefield that had already been broken by sword strikes and shadow clones now faced another layer of destruction from above, and the elite hunters still weren't finished.
The rain of iron finally landed. Hundreds of spinning blades pierced into the mushroom ranks at once, striking the ground like a field of black spears. Explosions of force ripped through the front lines. Small mushrooms were scattered, larger ones torn apart, and even the defensive structure shook under the impact. For a moment, it looked like the assault had completely overwhelmed them. But then, a calm voice rose from the battlefield. Soft, controlled, ancient. A staff lifted. Magic gathered. The mushrooms answered with power of their own. A giant mushroom body suddenly expanded upward, rising like a shield from the center of the attack zone. Massive, towering, its cap spread wide enough to cover the surrounding area. The falling shuriken that should have pierced through instead struck the giant cap and lodged into its thick surface. Again and again, metal hit living shield. The elite hunters had expected collapse. Instead, the mushroom side revealed organized defense. This was no random swarm anymore. Someone below understood battle and was already adapting.
The giant mushroom shield held for only a moment, because beneath that defense, the battlefield was already changing again. A line of mushroom mages stepped forward, staffs raised in perfect rhythm. Their voices repeated the same spell together, building magical pressure across the field. Not panic, not random chanting. This was coordinated magic. Then the first spell triggered. Boom! A mushroom mage detonated instantly, releasing a violent burst of energy from its own body. Then another, and another. One after another, living explosions erupted across the battlefield. These were not accidents. They were deliberate sacrifice attacks. Each blast sent shockwaves outward, targeting the invading force and disrupting the elite hunter's assault pattern. Even nearby mushrooms reacted with surprise, backing away from the chain of detonations. The battlefield that looked controlled only seconds ago became unstable again. And just as the explosion spread, a mechanical barrel shifted into view nearby, a cannon, which meant the mushroom side still had another weapon ready to fire. The defenders were not collapsing, they were escalating. Through the smoke of continuous explosions, one figure remained standing in the distance, the human elite still holding formation, weapon ready, waiting for the next wave. But on the mushroom side, another unit stepped forward. A purple mushroom with spiraling eyes dropped into position. At first, it looked almost harmless, until its expression changed. The moment it locked onto the target, its entire body tightened with violent intent. Then it screamed and launched. The mushroom shot forward like a living shell, moving with explosive speed across the battlefield. One after another, more followed behind it. Boom! Boom! Their bodies accelerated as if they had become projectiles themselves. This wasn't random movement, it was a direct attack pattern. Then the real skill activated. Spore explosion. A red mushroom at the center triggered the next stage, releasing concentrated spores with destructive force. The battlefield instantly shifted from direct combat into area devastation. Every step forward now carried hidden danger, because even the smallest mushroom could suddenly become a weapon. While explosive mushrooms rushed the field, one hunter didn't move at all. He simply watched, calm, unshaken. The blonde marksman rested his long rifle against his shoulder and spoke with complete confidence. Too slow. To him, this level of attack wasn't even real pressure, it was target practice. His hand moved to his ammunition pouch. Special rounds dropped between his fingers with practiced precision. no wasted motion, every bullet loaded with perfect rhythm. One by one, the shells slid into place. Then the rifle locked shut with a sharp click. That sound alone carried finality, because once he aimed, the battlefield changed. He lowered his stance, planted the weapon forward, and lined up the charging mushroom wave through the barrel. No panic, no hesitation, just absolute control. Against rushing spores, living explosives, and unstable battlefield magic, the marksman prepared his answer, and whatever came out of that rifle next would not miss. The rifle fired, and the answer came like a burst of sunlight tearing across the battlefield. A blazing projectile shot forward, exploding the instant it reached the mushroom line. Then the true skill activated. Sunset sleep. The first blast split into countless burning rounds, spreading outward like a storm of fire. Not one bullet, an entire burning barrage. The sky turned orange as explosive shots rained across the field, striking every mushroom in their path. Boom after boom after boom, the battlefield lit up in chains of impact. Defensive positions shattered. Smaller mushrooms were thrown backward. Even those hiding behind rock cover were caught in the spread. Fire spread through the front ranks, while fragments tore through anything still standing. For the mushroom army, there was no clear escape route. The attack covered too much ground. And when the smoke settled, HP numbers rose everywhere, HP dropping across multiple targets at once. The marksman had done exactly what he promised. He erased an entire wave before it could even reach him. Even after the burning barrage, the battlefield refused to fall silent. The mushroom army still moved, small units gathering, larger defenders shifting, mechanical structures adjusting position under pressure. The front line was damaged, but not broken. Then, away from the direct fighting, a different figure calmly stepped forward. No panic, no urgency. A pink-haired girl reached toward a small creature in her hands. Her movements were careful, almost gentle. She opened it, closed it, pressed it against her chest as if preparing something precious. Everything around her remained chaotic, but she acted as though the battlefield no longer mattered. Then she smiled and finally spoke. "It's time for lunch." A strange sentence in the middle of war, but the tone carried something dangerous beneath its sweetness. Because while the elite hunters had been overwhelming the front lines with raw force, someone on the mushroom side had now begun preparing a response of her own. And whatever she considered lunch, it clearly was not ordinary food. The small container in her hands began to shake. A low growl echoed from inside, deep, hungry, unnatural. Dark energy leaked from the opening as she held it steady, completely unfazed by what was emerging. Then, something massive burst out. A giant black creature slammed into the battlefield like a living beast dropped from the sky. Its body was heavy, violent, and fast enough to crush the ground on impact. Nearby mushrooms scattered instantly as the creature landed among them. No hesitation, no warning, just raw force. The shockwave spread through the surrounding area as more dark bodies followed behind it, piling into the battlefield like summoned predators. What looked harmless a moment ago had now become a full release of controlled monsters. The mushroom side had introduced a new weapon, not spell, not machine, not explosion, but living creatures built for destruction. And judging by the way they landed, they were hungry for whatever stood in front of them next. The summoned beast didn't stop after landing. It twisted through the battlefield like a giant whip of living darkness, carrying mushrooms, debris, and shattered ground in its path. Anything caught near it was lifted into the air. The battlefield became chaos again, small mushrooms spinning upward while the black creature curved through the center like a storm made alive. But the pink-haired girl remained completely in control.
With one clean swing, she guided the creature as if handling a weapon she had used many times before. Every movement answered her command. No wasted force, no fear. Then, just as suddenly, the creature paused. A small sound came from the container in her hand. A quiet burp, as if the beast had already finished consuming part of its target. That single detail made the moment even stranger, because while elite humans fought with skills, blades, and magic, this side was fighting with summoned hunger. And in the distance, the battlefield stretched wide under the giant mushroom forest, showing that this war was far from decided. Both sides were still revealing what they had hidden.
After wave of overwhelming attacks, the battlefield finally paused, at least for one small corner watching from above. Piggy had already fallen asleep beside the cliff, completely unbothered by the chaos below. But the little mushroom hero could no longer stay calm. Sweat rolled down his face as he stared at the battlefield in disbelief. Everything happening below had stopped looking like war and started looking like something far worse. A one-sided display of power. Elite humans cutting through mushroom forces with sword skills, magic storms, firearms, summoned shadows, and battlefield-class abilities. Every new attack erased another section of defenders before they could recover. Even the mushroom side's strange counters and summoned creatures barely slowed the pressure. And from where he stood, the truth became painfully obvious. This no longer felt like equals fighting. It felt like high-level players entering a beginner's zone and clearing weak monsters for experience. For the first time, even the usually determined mushroom hero looked shaken, because if this continued, the next target might eventually be him. And with that uneasy realization, the battlefield froze on a single thought. This fight was only getting started. To be continued.